Let's talk herd. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
It's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Camille. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So it would be lovely to hear about your relationship with horses, how you got started with them and how you connect with them.
Sounds great. Well, I'll kind of go back to the beginning from what I remember. I was a child that was just very enamored and taken with horses. The cool thing about being a child is I never felt that I needed to explain that. And now everyone, and as I am an adult, people say, "Oh, can you explain that and tell me, what is it about horses?" And I think back to my childhood and said, "Oh, it was so much easier. I could just feel it." So I remember having this draw, this connection to horses as a very young person, and that translated, I think, into a very what I have come to know as a very common path of in my primary and elementary years, taking horseback riding lessons. There was something that was just very freeing and kind of all-encompassing in a sense of wholeness in being around the horses. And it didn't seem to matter whether that was a riding relationship or if it was observing over a fence line or being, around a farm or a barn. Yeah. The horses, and from what I remember, it just had this very consistently grounding feel, which I know for me, it just felt very good in my body and in my system to be with horses. I find it interesting to reflect now as an adult in kind of how, I didn't question the pathway of, a riding relationship. I didn't question what I or, a teacher or trainer was asking of the horse or how it was being asked. And it didn't really even think much about the dynamic of relationship in that sense. Yeah. And I would say, oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to ask what age you were at this point.
So at this point, I was in, probably it was primary elementary school. So maybe, third, fourth, fifth grade, roughly in that age group. And I remember even continuing on into, kind of sixth and seventh grade, the more formality of, riding lessons just kind of faded into the background, but there was still that draw with horses. And I do remember as I continued on, even through, high school and college years and beyond, it was like, wow, any opportunity I had to just be in the presence of a horse, it was like, yes, please. I would absolutely love that. Yeah. And interesting to kind of see how the riding was still woven into kind of, I think up to a point what I thought the relationship almost needed to entail, because that was and I'm not critiquing here, but I think it was just a very common pathway. And, I didn't see how much that pathway had kind of woven into, looking at horse-human relationships and looking at it, through a lens of, of a riding relationship or a working relationship. And, it was maybe 2017, 2018. So 5 or so years ago, there was an organization that's just down the road from our home here in North Carolina. And they did what I think is very commonly being called equine assisted learning and equine assisted psychotherapy with young women in the community that have been met with some very substantial challenges, life challenges, and they have brought in partnership with horses to really bring some extra layers of support to these young women in the community. And my husband said to me, he said, "Why don't you go?" He said, "They're looking for volunteers." He said, "You drive by, every day, you are constantly just staring at the horses over the fence line. And there's that draw again that, is so hard to explain." And he said, "Why don't you go and just see what it's about?" So I remember going to a volunteer orientation and, long story short, I got connected and very involved with that organization, feeding, caring for the horses, even just kind of being in an assisting role in some of their programming where the girls and the horses are partnered up and working on relationship. And it really kind of, I think, widened and kind of reopened of something that I always knew was there. That there was so much more to the relationship piece, because riding was not it was not a focus piece necessarily of where I was kind of putting my time and effort in supporting and working with the organization. And so much of it was observational and learning more about horses as horses. And the things that I could feel as a child, but as I started getting into kind of more of the formal, formal pathway of riding lessons, the things that were not commonly talked about, at least not within my earshot. So I certainly don't want to say that it wasn't talked about at all. But as far as, remembering that or hearing that as a child about, learning about a horse as a horse and, their behavior and all of the, the wisdom just in their innate being that they bring to the table as being a prey animal, and the attunement of their body and their senses for survival. And, and how does that translate from, a setting of wild and domestic? And as humans, what is our role and responsibility in the recognition of that and the support of that? And how does that all impact and evolve, the relationship between horses and humans? So after that spell, I really got interested in just learning and being more with horses, and how I remembered being with them when I was very young. And I found some really amazing people along the way over the last 5 or 6 years that have really supported me. And I ended up going to Western Canada to do a more formal training in what my mentor is Hilary Schneider. She's in British Columbia. And what she terms as horse medicine leadership. And so I did training there, and was just incredibly supported by the horses and the humans. And in that time frame, I had a horse partner come into my life. His name is Dusty. And we're at a lovely farm here in North Carolina with surrounded by other amazing horses and people. And here we are.
So how did having him, your own horse, develop things for you? Did it change anything? Because it's a different feel, isn't it, when they're actually yours to care for? And
yes, it is. And I feel that our relationship is continually evolving. And I think that it is, I have found so much more ease at times in, interacting with the herd that I'm so familiar with in BC, or even going out to the farm and, observational and horses that are in someone else's care. And, and then having interface, with Dusty and knowing like, wow, we're taking care of one another in different ways. But I'm your care person, and I'm, responsible for, making decisions and, for health and well-being. And to your point, it does add it adds more gravity, I think, to the relationship, and in that, more opportunity for curiosity of, around intention, of like, what is the intention of, of this partnership? What is the intention of this relationship? And along that line, it's finding clarity within that, and allowing space for it to evolve. I realized we went through a very significant medical need and situation almost a month ago, and there's times now where it feels like, wow, we have been in each other's lives for almost 2 years now, and I feel like, wow, we're just getting to know one another.
Yeah, I think that's a lifelong thing, isn't it? It's like every day is the first day in a way. But yeah, it was really fascinating when you were talking about being a child and not coming up against those questions about riding. And I was just thinking about my childhood and my experiences. And I realized that those questions did come up for me, but only after because I was, lucky enough, fortunate enough to have a pony when I was 12, my first pony. And it really was only when I had him that I started to feel the friction, about not agreeing with the way people were wanting me to treat him, and the way people were teaching me, and, just feeling uncomfortable about things. And so maybe that is a kind of key to the relationship, that when you feel responsible, then you're more vulnerable in a way, or there's just a different dynamic.
Yes, and
happening.
I resonate with that very much, and it's something that I have reflected on quite a bit, because in coming into, I think, being in the horse and equestrian community as a guardian and caregiver for a horse. One thing that has really kind of hit my system in a different way is how heavily weighted, to me, the community feels at large. And, there's, and many of these things I'm grateful, because, there's, so much human influence that, you're certainly not short on an opinion or feedback. And, we were just in a situation recently where we relied very heavily on needing that. And Dusty ended up having a life-saving surgery. And so I'm very grateful for that input. But it does create an interesting mirror, I think, just, for humans, in the sense that, we're already experiencing this huge wave of information that is constantly hitting our system at any given time from a variety of sources, right? And I think that the horses have really brought in my life, Dusty and the other horses that I've had the privilege of being connected with and sharing time and relationship with, is that this recognition of sometimes things feel very out of balance and they feel very human weighted. And what I feel that I am being asked to contribute is being able to bring more weight to the horse. And I feel that, and I know that people are talking about, shifting. And it's not that it's like, you're trying to to use the expression of, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but, coming back to being perhaps more intentional, building more awareness about ourselves as humans, some of the patterns that we tend to follow, giving ourselves grace and also curiosity in our own development and awareness. And I think that allows us as humans, and you spoke about this from an earlier age, and I've certainly found it later in my life where it's like you start to think like, wow, I was really in a loop with that, and I didn't realize I was in that loop, or I didn't realize I was in that groove. And I certainly don't point any of that out as a right or wrong or a fault, but it's that I always get very curious and kind of excited when I am able to notice those things. Say, wow, I didn't realize that I just kind of had this typical way of approaching things, or I didn't think of something differently or think that there might be more options. And, I look at time spent with the horses, and by nature, they're so observational because they need to be, and they're so adaptive because they need to be. And, and certainly they have their own brilliance of routine and patterns that, certainly create a sense of stability for them, but not at the sake of them being masterful at fluidity and adaptability. And I feel that, for me, that has been such a gift from horses because it has really underscored and continued to expand, this curiosity and saying, okay, let's find the steady pieces that allow me as a human stability, stability in my life, and stability in the different roles that I play as a caregiver for Dusty, and a, space holder for clients, and as a mom, and as a partner, for my husband, and so on. But where can that continue to grow? Where can I find the steadiness, but also honor the fluidity, and adaptability, and really kind of getting into things in intentional ways. And if I can't figure out an intention or a purpose, being able to be curious about it and saying, well, what value is this offering to me? What value is this offering to my partner, whether that is a human person or whether that's a horse or another animal? So yeah, that's kind of where that's really been, I said it, and I don't think that's finite. I know that will continue to evolve, but that's really where kind of my relationship with horses, up to this point, has landed. And I know Dusty brings that to the table every day. I like to term, to say that he is incredibly masterful with his energy. And he is not a horse that you can just pop a halter on and say, okay, we're going to go here and we're going to go there and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, which is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has been a gift to me. I will be perfectly transparent and say it has not been without me needing to look at my own frustration or my own sense of urgency with things, that sometimes I think something is very important, and Dusty may in his own way, not have the same importance on it, or he may not, you know, and as, you know, horses are horses and humans are humans, you know, we certainly have different cognitive ways of processing and understanding things. You know, so then it comes back to the relationship and communication piece. But the gift that he gives me, and not always being willing to just kind of follow my whim of like, let's go do this or let's go do that, is it really comes back to intention. And for Dusty, I feel that, and this is me putting human words on it, but from my human understanding, Dusty needs to feel that it's a good and safe investment of his time and his energy. In addition to knowing that his, you know, his needs at the time are met, which certainly increases his own sense of safety and well-being and willingness to try other things. So I think in our relationship, he just very much underscores what's the intention.
Okay.
You know, what is the intention of this? Which is really great. It's offered so much growth for me as a person. And I feel that the more I grow and the more awareness I have, you know, it supports and can enrich, you know, his experience. And, you know, how he finds his well-being and stability as a horse.
You said that you feel like, and I agree with this idea that it's weighted, you know, the whole horse-human dynamic or world, I suppose, is weighted more towards people. So how do you feel that you bring that back the other way? Is it more to do with like handling or management or more the actual dynamic between you energetically? How would you say that you do that in real terms?
Sure. I think for me at this point, it really comes back to self-awareness and self-relationship, which I'm a fan of paradoxes. So as I say, this is very human weighted, and yet it comes back to the human, right? I feel that that's a bit paradoxy, but it's right up my alley. I could do paradoxes all day. And the reason I say that is I feel that there is an invitation, and of course I'm speaking to my own experience and you know, and people that I have had a shared experience with in this dynamic. I feel that there is an invitation to continue to, and I think there's a lot of different ways that this can resonate with people, but whether it's stepping back into ourselves, kind of returning to deeper layers and levels of embodiment, self-reclamation, self-connection, self-awareness. Those are just a few things that pop into my head, but I feel that individuals have kind of very unique terms in the sense of coming back to self. And I feel that for me, in my experience, when I have been able to kind of return the spotlight back to me, and be able to kind of pull out my tools, resources, you know, perhaps reaching out to support to get another tool or resource that is meaningful in that moment or in that time in my life, that I have been able to continue to walk this path of building more awareness and becoming, I think the word claiming also comes up for me, of more of myself. And I feel that as I have been able to step into more of myself and my own authenticity, I have given myself opportunities to have clearer intentions, more curiosity, a deeper connection with my own intuition, which then bringing it back to where, you know, it's a very human weighted world. That has allowed me to kind of check in more with myself and check in with Dusty, or if there's another horse that's, you know, that may be involved, has said, what am I feeling here? You know, what am I picking up from this? So, you know, I may be receiving all of these different opinions and feedback and things like that. And I think my normal way of operating in the past was like, wow, I have to hold all of this now because, you know, everyone's an expert, or at least everyone feels like an expert. And if they're saying that I need to do this and, you know, Dusty needs that, or, you know, it was so, it was just, for me, it became so overwhelming to just hold all of that and try and do and take action on all of that. And then in the end, when I ended up landing in a place that still didn't feel congruent, it's like, why does this still feel so sticky? And why does Dusty not seem happy? And why am I all kind of twisty in this? And I realized, you know, because of that influence of all of these, you know, opinions and feedback and advice, and you should do this, or you need to do that, or try this. And there's all of these different methodologies and techniques and things like that.
Do you have an example of some of those?
Well, sure. Actually, one that is probably most familiar to me, because it was a kind of how I segued into, I feel, seeing more of the horse than I was exposed to when I was younger, and in kind of a more traditional format of horsemanship. Was the and I forgive me because I think that there are several different names, but natural horsemanship would be one example, and it did provide, I feel, much gratitude for that particular methodology, because it certainly opened my eyes to more. But as I found myself, anytime I kind of get disconnected with myself and kind of get very externally focused, I found that it was very easy to kind of get attached or hooked onto that. And then that became the thing. And it says, okay, well, these are the parameters. And here's a really interesting example. When there was a dear friend and mentor of mine that was the caregiver for Dusty before we came into each other's lives. And we had corresponded by email, and I just said, hey, just so you know, I'm looking for a horse partner. And she had gotten back to me, and she said, I know you know Dusty. But she said, I'm actually looking for to match him with a person that would be a great lifelong caregiver for him. Would you be interested? I said, well, sure. I said, well, let me come out and kind of let's re-meet. And I remember I went out, and of course I went out with the halter, and I brought Dusty into the round pen, and I took out my best natural horsemanship skills. And we took the halter off, and we said, okay, we're going to be in the round pen, and we're going to be at liberty. And I had my carrot stick, and I said, let's just, because that was how I was introduced in a new way to relationship. And I have so much gratitude for that, until all of a sudden Dusty called me on this big time and said, oh, wait, hang on. And this is me putting human words on it again. It's like I had completely gotten myself into a groove and into a pathway that I was not aware of at the time. And I was didn't realize that I was just relying on those particular tools. And Dusty, in his wisdom, he was having nothing of it. And he said, I got from him that he was not interested in participating in any of that. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like everything was just blowing back in my face. And I was just beside myself.
Yeah.
And of course I think it was July in North Carolina, and it's sweltering here. The humidity is really high. I'm like, oh.
So how did he show you that? Like, how did he behave?
He stood along the far rail of the round pen, and he was we were perpendicular to each other, so his side body was towards me, and I was I wish I had a video of it, because I must have looked like a crazy person hopping around the round pen, and I'm it's like, oh, I'm trying to bring the energy up, and Dusty's just standing there, and he'd occasionally kind of like flick or turn an ear and swat a fly with his tail, and he'd occasionally just take a deep breath, and it was it for me, it was almost an experience of like, you have another being that is literally just waiting for you to work all of this out of your system. And I remember
I can really feel that.
Oh, I just became utterly exhausted. I flopped down on the ground, and I sweat, tears are now starting to come. And when all of that just finally worked through, I could actually feel myself again. I could feel my body. And this thought just kind of bubbled up, clear as day, that said, and this is going to be different.
So beautiful, isn't it?
And it didn't say you need to throw all of the natural horsemanship out the window. So again, it's kind of the baby with the bathwater, but it was a reminder of something that I had known, but it's like we all get into patterns, and the patterns may serve us until they don't serve us anymore. And this was going to be different. And this relationship between Dusty and I was going to be more intuitive. It was going to be more moment to moment. It was not going to be prescriptive or methodical in the sense of like, you follow these steps, A, B, C, D, or you do this certain activity and you're going to get this result. Our relationship has been a constant reminder that life and relationships exist in moment to moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes we may have relationships that have more of a breadth for following a particular design or pattern. But I feel that this particular relationship that Dusty and I share, at least now at this point that we are in this relationship, that it is a very moment to moment, follow your intuition, based on your intuition, pick the best tool right now. And we're going to use that, and we're going to try that, and we're going to see what we get. But in all of that, make sure that we have an intention that's supporting that, that we're not just like, just grabbing stuff out of the ether and throwing spaghetti to the wall and seeing what sticks. But that it also needs to be very intentional. Yeah.